My first encounter happened a few years ago during a solo hiking trip in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. I'd always found solace in the solitude of the woods, but that day the forest felt different, quieter, more foreboding. It was late afternoon when I set off on a familiar trail, my backpack filled with essentials, my mind eager for the tranquility only nature could offer. The hike started uneventfully, the path winding through towering pines and moss-covered rocks. About an hour in, I noticed a side trail I'd never seen before. Curiosity piqued, and I decided to explore. The new path was narrow and overgrown, clearly unused for a long time. The deeper I went, the more uneasy I felt, but something compelled me to keep going. Suddenly, the trail ended abruptly in a small clearing. At the center, I found a makeshift campsite with remnants of a fire pit and a few scattered belongings, an old backpack, a rusted lantern, and a tattered notebook. Flipping through the notebook, I discovered it belonged to a hiker named Sam who had gone missing years ago. His final entries detailed a creeping paranoia, mentions of being watched, and finally, a desperate plea for help. As the sun began to set, I decided to head back, but when I turned around, the trail was gone. Panic set in as I realized I was disoriented. The trees, once familiar, now loomed like silent sentinels. I retraced my steps to the clearing, only to find the campsite had vanished, replaced by an undisturbed forest floor. With no other options, I spent a sleepless night in the woods, every rustle and snap amplifying my fear. At dawn, I miraculously stumbled upon the main trail and fled back to safety. To this day, I wonder if Sam's spirit led me to his last known location, seeking to share his story. The second encounter occurred while camping with friends in the Appalachian Mountains. We had set up camp near a picturesque stream, surrounded by dense woodland. The first night was filled with laughter, ghost stories, and the comforting glow of the campfire. But as we settled into our tents, an unsettling feeling crept over me. Around midnight, I awoke to the sound of branches snapping nearby. Peering out of my tent, I saw a shadowy figure standing just beyond the firelight. My heart raced as I watched the figure remain still, as if observing us. I whispered to my friend Mark, who groggily sat up and saw it too. We debated whether to confront it, but fear kept us in our tents. The figure eventually disappeared, and we tried to convince ourselves it was just another camper or a trick of the light. The next morning, we found footprints circling our campsite. They were deep, suggesting a heavy, barefooted person. We decided to move our camp closer to the main trail, hoping to avoid further encounters. That night, the atmosphere was tense. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps. This time, they were closer, almost as if they were circling our tents. Gathering my courage, I unzipped the tent and shone my flashlight into the darkness. The beam caught a pair of eyes reflecting back at me, but before I could react, they vanished. In the morning, we packed up and left, shaken by the experience. A park ranger later told us about a hermit who lived in those woods, rumored to watch campers from a distance. Whether it was him or something else, I never felt truly safe camping in the wild again. The third and final story happened during a hunting trip in the remote forests of Montana. My brother and I were deep in the wilderness, tracking deer, when we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. The structure was dilapidated, with windows broken, and the door hanging off its hinges. Despite its state, we decided to take a look inside, hoping to find shelter from an approaching storm. The interior was dark and musty, filled with cobwebs and decaying furniture. In one corner, we found a trap door leading to a basement. Against my better judgment, we decided to investigate. The basement was cold and damp, with shelves lined with jars of preserved food and old hunting gear. But what caught our attention was a wall covered in photographs, black and white pictures of people, each one marked with a date. As we examined the photos, we noticed a disturbing pattern. The dates were all within the past decade, and each person had a look of sheer terror on their face. Among them, we found a recent photo of a missing hiker from a nearby town, his face twisted in fear. Just then, we heard the sound of footsteps above us. Panic set in as we realized we weren't alone. We quickly extinguished our flashlights and hid in the shadows. The footsteps grew louder, descending the creaky stairs. Holding our breath, we watched as a man appeared, his face hidden under a hood. He began muttering to himself, arranging the jars on the shelves. Suddenly, he stopped, sensing our presence. The air was thick with tension as he slowly turned towards us. In a split-second decision, my brother and I bolted up the stairs, knocking over shelves and jars in our haste. We burst out of the cabin and sprinted through the forest, not daring to look back until we reached our truck. We reported the cabin to the authorities, but when they investigated, they found it empty, the photographs and jars gone. To this day, the memory of that man's face, hidden in the shadows, haunts me, a reminder of the hidden horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. These encounters have taught me that the woods, while beautiful and serene, can also hide unimaginable terrors. It's a place where the line between reality and the supernatural blurs, and where the most disturbing truths often lie just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered.